say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
Do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. Do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm the Voidwalker.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Oh, broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void Live. It is Hump Day, Wednesday, March the 12th, 2025, a little bit after 9 here in the natural state. We're waiting on that. What is that? That blood moon? Is that what we're waiting on? I don't think we're going to be able to see it, though. That's the other thing. I don't think we're going to be able to see it. But tonight, man, we're going to get into cosmic consciousness. And this book is actually, it's a pretty interesting book. But what makes it more interesting is that our fellow Voidwalker, Coach Chris, who this is, you guys, if you go back and hear his story about how he uncovered all of these things at this, what was it, Chris? It was like a chapel. Isn't that where you found the books underground in a chapel? Like or was it in a roof? I forget. I forget where you found them.
The most unsuspecting place, inside the back room of a chapel, buried under about 6 inches of rat feces. About 8 moving boxes, full of books on the occult, magic, esoteric, Christianity, mysticism, all these amazing things that we like to discuss here. I found a literal treasure chest of books to discuss. And the book that started my journey into this new realm of consciousness was the book Cosmic Consciousness. I found out that book changed Steve Jobs' life, and he was known for walking around everywhere carrying this book under his arm. And so I wanted to see what he learned. And yeah, this book is just mind-blowing, because as I've begun to read many of these other books, cosmic consciousness is referred to in so many other spiritual texts and in secret societies and the secret schools. They often refer to it as soul consciousness, but Richard Buke or Buck. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He wrote the book on it, Cosmic Consciousness. I believe it was published in 1901. So
Yeah.
over 100 years ago, they were talking about this.
So I pulled up a cap of it and some of the like a PDF just in case I needed it. But this book, what I find fascinating about this book is he believed, and you read the book from front to back, so you know, he believed that humanity is evolving towards a higher state of awareness. Now he's a psychiatrist, he's a doctor, so this wasn't like, I don't think this was a thing to where he was just like in la la land, but he really truly believed that we're waking up to a higher state of awareness, or a cosmic awakening. So I want to kind of go over his ideas and how that relates to your story. But there's a ton of mystics and poets that he studied. So, and what's his name? Jacques. It was his name, Jacques Vallée or whatever. I forget how to, probably butchered his last name. He was just on Joe Rogan. And so now all of these like conscious, I guess people in the conscious field are showing up on Rogan's podcast, which I think is great. I mean, I really do. I think it's great. But it kind of proves what he's saying. I know it doesn't seem like that, but we need to debate this. Like, are we really evolving like into a cosmic state of awareness? Now, he claims that figures like Buddha, Jesus, and even Walt Whitman tapped into some kind of universal awareness. And it's not just for those few that eventually. Now, did he think that eventually all of us were going to get there? Is that what he said?
No, he said, no, not merely a self-conscious man can be made to understand the things in a cosmic sense. It had to be through some sort of attainment.
So he wasn't under the impression that like everybody is eventually going to evolve into some higher state of awareness or consciousness. Not just a higher state of awareness, but he believed that it was like that we were going to evolve into like whole different beings. I mean, not aliens, but as far as consciously is concerned, right?
Right. He did attribute there being levels to it, and that not everybody is on the same level.
Yeah.
So we're evolving at different rates based on your spiritual and soul evolution.
Yeah. So again, this is 1901. Think about this. I don't know what I'm sure there's always been a new age movement or something of that nature all the time, but I don't know what it was like in 1901. I have to think that a doctor, a psychiatrist, making these claims was probably a scary thing. But we'll get into when his like enlightenment experience happened. So I want to get into a little bit about this dude. He's a Canadian psychiatrist, an adventurer, and a thinker. He was born in 1837 and he died in 1902. So it talked about his early life in the beginning of the book. He like lost a foot to frostbite, survived a bunch of hardships. I guess what did he do? I guess he crossed the Rockies, right? And he ended up working with, this is what's interesting, the mentally ill. Did you find that interesting that this is kind of what sparked his curiosity, but working with the mentally ill?
I found the whole beginning of the book extremely curious because his life was so similar to mine. Even that, working with the mentally ill. When I was in high school, there was an elective. It was called cadet teaching. And my whole class period was to hang out with the I don't even know what the proper word is right now. The special kids, the ones that need the kid I was, I got basically tagged with to hang out with a Down syndrome kid for his whole class period. But I did the whole mountain thing too. I didn't travel the Rockies, but you know, you travel a lot of mountains, Recon Ridge and Marine Corps. Sorry about the dog barking in the background.
That's okay.
He died February 19th. You mentioned in 1902. That's the same day I joined the Marine Corps. I have February 19th tattooed on my right arm. That's the day you had me back on your show recently, February 19th. I had all this stuff underlined in that book. I know, all kinds of crazy synchronicities, but
crazy synchronicity, right? So this guy, at the time, you have to imagine he was also kind of battling. I think that's when Darwin's theory of evolution started getting big, and that had to have been colliding with, you know, psychology too. So basic psychology. And here's a guy that's a psychologist. You got all these people talking about Darwin, and he's like, "Nah, man, we're evolving into these beings, into these super conscious beings." So, but he also took a spiritual and a scientific approach. And you have to think, back then they didn't have MRIs, spindle machines, anything to like measure consciousness with. So, yeah, I wonder what sparked it. It says here that the one thing, and I find this really, really interesting. Two things actually I find really interesting. Him investigating like the mentally ill is what made him start thinking about this thing. Why is that? Right? And two, that he had a mystical experience. I think it was either while he was reading a romance novel or it was like poetry or something, right? And that's when he had that enlightening kind of experience.
Well, it says that he was having an evening with friends, and he was driving home alone, and he was thinking about the night, and that this light embraced him while he was alone. And he talks about that being like one of the first states to achieving cosmic consciousness is what happened to him in some sort of experience with an all-embracing light.
Yeah. So he looked at consciousness in 3 stages. The first stage is the animals, second being humans, and third being cosmic consciousness, right? So animals have like this basic awareness of the world, and then the self-conscious, which is us. This is how he kind of broke it down scientifically, which is us, where humans, where we reflect on ourselves via language and relation and ego. And then the third stage would be like a leap beyond, or a sense of oneness, timelessness, and joy. And he said, I think that he had a sudden illumination and a loss, or he had a loss of a fear of death. And to me, that fear of death is why we ask a lot of these mysteries, because deep down, a lot of us fear death. But I think in the book, he talked about once he realized the state, he actually stopped fearing death. Versus where you hear a lot of people say, well, I'm not really afraid of it. But deep down, they're either just not thinking about it or they're not dealing with it. But I mean, he's stating that he lost all fear of death, you know.
The loss of fear of death is the 5th step in this cosmic consciousness. When you get down to the nitty gritty, he puts it in 8 steps.
What are the 8 steps?
Well, let me tell you the 5th one, because that's where we started. It is the loss of the fear of death. And so this can happen to regular people. So in the book, he's attributing this to these great people of the past, but also people of the present. And what's great about this is it includes you and me and everybody listening. So, I mean, how do you have the loss of fear of death? That seems pretty profound thing to attain, but people that have a near-death experience, sometimes that'll do it for you. But it says here, the 5th step is the loss of the fear of death. This goes hand in hand with the sense of immortality. Thousands today say without hesitation that they know they are immortal. Still, other thousands proclaim positively that there is no death. But no one, even in 10,000, knows in the sense which soul consciousness alone makes possible.
Right.
That he is immortal, and what is called death is in reality but a birth. Intellectual, reasoned belief and mental conviction, no matter how logical or to what degree confirmed by reason, does not impart true actual knowledge. Only in the experience which soul consciousness gives is this possible.
Yeah, that's true. I get that. Yeah. So this is all like intuitive, except for people that have had NDEs. And by the way, I've found the guy that got shot 8 times. He's rescheduled with me again, but I'm going to corner that dude and we're going to have a show about it because he said he had 4 separate out of body experiences after he got shot.
50 Cent?
No, it ain't 50 Cent. It's actually one of my neighbors. He got robbed and shot 8 times and lived. Right? Like this just happened to him. Like I think a month ago. So the guy that there was this guy that was trying to bully him and he wouldn't, like he said that he wouldn't go for it. And I don't know the whole story and I don't even know what I can talk about because the court date's coming up too. But he told him he was going to kill him and the dude shot him 8, killed his dog, shot his dog, and then shot him 8 times. So they rushed him to the hospital. And when I got back home from work, driving into the station up here, he came running up to me telling me about how the OBE thing was real because he knows that we talk about it on the show. But yeah, he really wanted to discuss all the stuff that he saw because he said he saw people moving in and out of the hospital and that he talked to a dude. And I was like, man, I got to get you on the show, but I've been trying to get him on the show. And so, yeah. So that guy knows.
That's pure evil he faced. A dude shot you 9 times and killed your dog before he killed you. That means he wanted you to see your dog die too.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I don't know if his dog was biting. I don't know. But the reason why he told me the guy shot him 8 times is because he was fighting back. You know, he didn't have a gun. The other guy did. So he started fighting back. It's that fight or flight thing, man. Some people run, some people fight. It just depends on who you are, you know. But back to the book, anyways. But my whole point with that is he knows there's something after death. Like he's not. You can tell he's not even worried about it. No.
I'm not either.
Here's where I get tossed up about this book, Cosmic Consciousness. Okay. Now, his predictions are is this state is rare, this illuminated state that he received. And he says it's super rare and that we're evolving into it, but that we will grow more and more. This will grow more and more common as humanity, quote, evolves. Now, remember, back in his time, they were talking about evolution quite a bit. Now, it's 2025. He's not alive. But if he was alive today, do you think he would say, oh, yeah, I was right. We're definitely evolving?
I do. I think the numbers would show it in this sort of what people call the rebirth of New Age. But having read these books that are from 100 years ago, it's clear that this stuff was coming out and that there may have been some massive effort to like dumb down the population in multiple ways.
You think so?
I think so, because people, if they were writing books on this stuff 100 years ago, but there's like my mom didn't know about any of this stuff. I didn't hear about any of this stuff until recently. Now you hear about it on podcasts and there's TV shows about this stuff on streaming stations, but so it seems to me like this was all sort of tucked away for a while. Even the fact that these books were put away, buried in the back of a chapel, they had been removed from libraries and pulled off shelves for having controversial topics.
So why do you think, does he go into the, does he go into why he became interested in this cosmic conscious awareness after he was talking to the mentally ill? Does he get into that?
I don't remember what he says about that.
Yeah, because it's just like the notes here, just it's like brief. He says, well, he worked a lot with mentally ill patients, and then that sparked his curiosity about the spiritual world and consciousness. So that tells me that a lot of mentally ill people were quote mentally ill people were talking to him about this stuff, you know?
You know, maybe you're right. Maybe the split personality, maybe he was dealing with lots of people that were wrongly diagnosed as mentally ill.
I bet you. Think about that. Can you imagine how many people back then? I mean, it still happens today, but how many people back then were diagnosed with some kind of mental disease they really didn't have, and they were getting like shock treatments and all kinds of shit? That's scary to think about, man. I mean, I think I might have been like diagnosed as mentally ill if I talking about this stuff that some of the shows that we've had discussions about back in 1901. If I'd have just went around in the street and started talking to people about it, they would have put me in a nut house, bro. It'd have put us both in a nut house, don't you think?
Yeah.
Now,
for sure.
He says that this. So his theory though, is that it's science, that this is a natural step, like we're supposedly growing some kind of new sense, like waking up one day and just feeling the universe. I mean, that's not really what is going to happen to everybody, but some people get these enlightened things. Here's where I call BS on a lot of this stuff, okay? Not what he's saying, because I believe in this. There's part of this I believe, some of it I question. So I've talked to a lot of people, Chris, that I can just tell that they're just bullshitting me about how enlightened they are, or their stories when they tell me they had this thing happen to them. And I can smell BS a lot of times, like bees can smell fear. But then again, I've caught myself being naive and not understanding certain things too. So I have to think that this really happened to him, though. If he wrote a whole book about it as a psychiatrist back in 1901, published it pretty early too. So he put his entire career on the line to put this stuff out. You know what I'm saying? So something happened to this guy. I do believe that.
Well, he died right after it was published. Isn't that crazy?
That's like his soul. He's like, yep, I did it. Now it's my time to go. Huh? Let's see how old he was. Let's do the math. 1901. When did he die again?
1902. The book was published in 1901. He died a year later, so he didn't get to see its success.
1872. Yeah. So, yeah, he was only like 70, maybe 69 or 70, right? No. What am I thinking? 1872 to 1900. No, dude. Wait, he was born in 1837. So the pivotal moment that happened to him, this is the second thing that I find interesting. In 1872, this is when he was, 30, 47, 57, 67. So he was 30 something. So he was reading romantic poetry, and then he had a spontaneous mystical experience. He said he felt like he was bathed in light, sensing unity with all things. Mm-hmm. Isn't that trippy? So you know
that's
how I
the
talk.
First step.
What's the first step?
The subjective light. This is an inner light which precedes soul consciousness and which, through training, becomes intensified, centered, definitely and consciously located at its true physical center, and in final illumination becomes objectified.
That's crazy. You know, the Golden Dawn magicians, which, by the way, started their group in 1888 around his time. They called that same light, they called that Luke's energy. They talk about it the same way he talks about it. And I don't even think they knew about each other. But then again, he talk about that this happens across all religions.
That's his point.
Yeah.
That it can happen to anybody. Like you said, Jesus, Buddha, Walt Whitman, he mentions those people, the Apostle Paul in his text. But this stuff happened to me, Joe. Every single one of these steps it's been crazy because all this stuff happened to me, and then reading the text later, it's
like a
fascinating.
validation when you read the book.
It's a validation, and it's in other books. There's a series of books called The Initiates. They're from the author, the last name Clymer. What's his first name?
Hell, I don't know.
Anyways, R. Swinburne Clymer. He refers to all these steps in an entire different text. Cosmic consciousness, soul consciousness is referred to by different.
What do you?
Catholics would probably call it the Holy Spirit.
Right.
I don't know what any other religion would call it.
So PK says using psychiatry for state violence. Check out Thomas Saz. I can't say that last. The Myth of Mental Illness. Basically, germ versus terrain theory, but for psychiatrists. They used to be called alienists.
Yeah.
Really?
That's a real good point. Well, it just makes a good point because people were going to say that people are crazy, but what if they're just harboring other spirits? I mean, that's a whole different topic, but
well, no, I mean, it's a good topic. I mean, because
crazy versus, consciousness of a different kind.
Right. Robert Zinsner come on the show one time, or Zinsner, and we talked about he was a psychiatrist, and he talked about his methods of soul-centered healing. And he said there's all kinds of psychiatrists that when they do therapy, that they start seeing this realm. And he said he thinks a lot of them don't want to speak about it, but they know that it's real. And what would happen to him, and you can go back and listen to the show, is he would try to get down to a person's like core issues, because psychiatry mainly believes that most of our core issues comes from childhood trauma and trauma that's happened in our lives. But that when he would get down to the trauma, because that's what they're trying to do, is work their way down to the core problem and then clinically heal it. That there were these like beings that would come up, or altered personalities, or just things that weren't even relatively anything close to the patient itself, and was blocking him sometimes from even going there, so that they would develop these, I don't know, entities, right, so to speak, that blocked them.
Okay, so when an exorcist goes in, it needs to confront the demon. It needs to ask you, it needs to find out its name so it can be exorcised. So I can imagine a psychiatrist simply having a conversation with somebody, trying to have a breakthrough, and another entity showing itself. Yeah,
that's what he said happens, man. And he developed this whole method of doing a psychiatry and psychology based on what he found out about these things. So, but I think here's what I think. This has always been my theory, and you can tell me if he talks about this in the book or not, but so I'm kind of a hermeticist, right? You know that. So I believe in as above, so below. So the things that we study in nature, like Manly P. Hall says, are things that reveal the mysteries to us. And all things in nature have a masculine and a feminine. They just do. Everything does. It has an opposite. When the two opposites come together, it creates things, or it makes a certain spark of energy. And for us, when the two opposites come together, it makes babies, right? That's what we do. Now, if we're coming into those two energies, the alpha and the omega, the 2 in 1, the bridegroom, right, are the things that are the keys to the mysteries. And that's hinted in so many different books. It's insane. When he's reading this romance stuff, right, when he's reading these romance novels, that feeling that he got, that romantic feeling that he got, it wasn't a novel, I think it was a poetry, but that romantic feeling that he got was his energy trying to come together with that other energy. And it probably just his masculine and feminine energy came together in himself, which therefore he had an enlightening experience. I don't think he talked about that in that book, right? But maybe not, Did he talk about that at all?
No.
Now, when I say masculine and feminine, people need to understand I'm not talking about boy and girl, man and woman. You know, that's what people think. Man and woman. No, you have a left brain, you have a right brain. It's the same thing. It's alpha and omega. You have an anima, according to Carl Jung, and the animus. You have to deal with both, depending on whether you're a girl or a guy. You're going to deal with one more than the other. When you get a certain romantic feelings, those feelings don't just come out of nowhere. And I've even talked to people and they're like, oh man, you're talking about when you're being horny, right? And I'm like, I get to the point where I don't even want to talk about it. I'm like, go read the sacred books about Tantra, healing, and what alchemy is really all about, and then come back and talk to me. And people just can't get past the idea of physical sex and boy and girl when I talk about masculine and feminine. So I have a hard time talking about it. And yet, this guy, even himself, reading romantic poetry is when all of a sudden he started getting downloads of enlightening stuff. It's the same thing the Gnostics talked about. It's the exact same thing. So I bet he wasn't even aware of that. I mean, just because somebody has a spiritual enlightening moment doesn't mean that they're super intelligent and they know everything about spirituality. That's common sense. Like nobody does. You know what I mean? But he did say he had a sudden onset of light and peace and a new worldview just as soon as he started reading that poetry, which I find fascinating, though.
That is fascinating because it brings up, like you said, this topic that people tend to twist into comedy. But so I've often been on one side or the other of the feminine or masculine, and then found a good balance where I am now. And so that balance, I think, is really important. Like growing up, I grew up with just a mom. And so I was probably just a soft little shy boy until you turn about 13, 14, I started seeing what I needed to do to fit into the crowd I was in, you know, the survival mode. So you had to turn bully or be an athlete or get bullied. So, and then full masculine as a Marine. But now, brother, I'll cry, you know, at a sad movie.
Good.
You know, I'll cry whenever I feel sad. I'm not one of these guys that walks around with his chest pumped out. But I feel like I also will, you know, don't push me because I'm not one to be pushed around. So I think having a good balance is probably key to having a spiritual enlightenment, you know, and not being afraid to recognize your feminine, if that's what you want to call it, or your quote unquote soft side.
Well, it's the key to your authenticity, right? Like it just is. And your authenticity is directly related to your spiritual enlightenment. You know, somebody taught you that you had to be tough when you were a kid, when you were born into this world, as like Jesus talks about kids going to this world. You can't enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're like a child. Children, when they have emotions, they express them. They say what they think. And just like all energy in the world, there's an input and an output. So if you eat and you don't shit, you're going to die, right? Like if you inhale and you don't exhale, you're going to die. If you drink and you don't pee, you're going to die. So why would anybody think that if you take on any type of trauma or sad or any kind of emotion, that if you don't process the emotion, something's bad's not going to happen to you? Somebody taught you that way because they were in pain. They tried to be authentic. The world didn't like it, and they let the world tell them what to do. And so they put on a shell, you know, and this is what it means to be tough and a man or whatever. Girls do it too. Trust me, they do it too. And they don't process the emotions, or they process them in unhealthy ways. So they hold the shit in until the freaking pop. And that's the one thing that psychology and it kind of teaches you. Like, you have to process this stuff, man. You know, So, and not only that, man, once you're really in tune with it, you could read poetry and you could watch a movie or read a romance novel or whatever and get that feeling and not feel like you're whatever the hell the world is telling you are. And then he had an enlightening experience. He wrote a whole book about this called Cosmic Consciousness. And one of his biggest experiences was the romance feeling and working with people that were crazy. Think about that, man. Considered crazy, considered mentally ill. In 1901, back when everybody's pushing Darwinism down your throat, right? That had to have been a pretty brave thing to do. Now, we talk about it freely now, and most of the time we don't get locked up unless you're in Florida, but you know, Whitman wrote, "I am large, I contain multitudes." When Walt Whitman wrote that, "I am large, I contain multitudes," I think that's what he was talking about, is this cosmic consciousness, you know. I know it's a term that gets thrown around, right? It's definitely a woo term. But what I think it really means is, like I was talking about earlier, if you look at the earth and you look at nature, everything is an alpha and omega, a masculine and a feminine, a positive and a negative energy coming together to create something. If man and woman come together to create babies in this womb, that's what I think this is. It's a womb, right? So when we're coming together and we're kind of in like this safe womb to become something bigger than we are. That's what I think, and that's why I'm fascinated with this book. Because if you observe nature, nature's doing the same thing all the time. Alpha and Omega coming together create something, or X and Y comes together and create something. So what are we doing here? There's billions of us, a whole bunch of billions of males or X chromosomes and a whole bunch of billions of females. You could look at it, Y chromosomes, and we're all coming together and going apart, coming together and going apart. And we die and we recycle. What the hell's going on? It's definitely not purposeless. And if you think it's purposeless and you look up at the stars at night and you think, oh, it's just, you know, whatever, it's just reality. You're bullshitting yourself. So what's really going on? And I think that's what's really going on. I just don't think that we know per se, like what to call it, you know, because he talks about that in this book. Like Jesus went through the transfiguration. Buddha and had his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Muhammad had his revelations in a cave. So that's a common thread, right? A shift from personal to universal. But if you look at the energy of all of what happened to Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, it's the same energy. They're following their heart. They're following what guides them. That is like the alpha, the rushing force of, like, I guess you could say Chokmah, the tree of life, coming into Bina. There's the cave. Or the Bodhi tree. That could represent Bina too. It's just energy. And I think what I'm fascinated is, and I'm going to get kind of woo on you here, Chris, but what people call like UFOs, or when they have certain experiences that come into this dimension, I think a lot of people aren't telling the truth, but some of them are. You know, some of them definitely are. And no, I don't believe this place is a soul trap. I don't believe this place is a prison. Does he talk about that in the book at all? Like, he doesn't believe that this place is some kind of prison or a trap, right?
No,
I don't
not
remotely feel that. I'm not mad at anybody for thinking that. I can understand why you would think that. It's just, I think it's sad that people think that, you know. Like this is some kind of soul trap, and we're just victims of some cosmic joke, you know. Where does that really come from? Anyways, am I missing anything?
Bugs getting burnt up in the light, you know.
Bugs getting burnt in the light, yeah. No, I don't think that, man. I don't. It's like if when a baby's in a healthy womb, I mean, when it's growing in from that little, embryo into a baby. It's coming out in that Fibonacci sequence slowly but surely over a period of 9 months. And I've watched the videos. They're so cool. And it's coming into the form of a baby. You could say that womb is a trap. I mean, it can't even stretch its legs hardly, and it kicks and stuff. And there's all kinds of stuff keeping it in there. And, but eventually it gets born into something else. It gets released, and so will we. But, that's a whole other thing. And I think that's kind of, when we say live life like a lucid dream, and then eventually we're going to wake up from this lucid dream of life, I think that's what it is. I think it's like you said in the book said, when you die, it's not really death, it's a birth. That's such a trippy paradox to think about, though.
It's a birth back into the cosmic fluid so that you can decide what you're going to do next.
Yeah, I mean, like I love life. I love. There's so many good things about life, and I get these intuitive insights sometimes. And I know I've talked to you about this, Chris, that I feel like that, as bad as we think this place is, sometimes it's not bad at all. And for a spiritual birthing ground, it's kind of like a big cosmic playpen for babies that are being ready to be spiritually reborn. That the reason why we think death is so horrible is because we don't know what the hell's on the other side. If we knew we were going to be, like, if you knew that you were going to be born when you die, and that's not death at all, or even if you knew that you were going to recycle back into the earth until you spiritually became whatever, I guess, spiritually enlightened enough, whatever you want to call it, and then you would be born into something else, would you really be so scared? Would you treat life the same? I don't think anybody would treat life the same. That's why they keep it a mystery.
Well, I mean, according to these steps here, is an important part of the transformation is the loss of the fear of death.
Yeah. I mean, it to each his own. I'm not trying to judge. We're not on the same frequency. That's all. Like, you're not going to be on the same frequency as everybody. Like, I love life and light. I love them both. And I think consciousness is trying, based on what I've observed in nature and what we've observed in the universe. I think consciousness is trying to grow a whole separate being, and it's using, I guess you could say, the soil of our individual bodies to grow something else. It's just obvious what it's doing. And so I don't look at any of this as some kind of trap. Is there suffering? Yeah, there's suffering. But how much of that suffering is self-imposed? A hell of a lot more than we'd like to admit. How much of the bad shit in the world is really our doing? People blame it on the devil. They blame it on archons. But when it comes down to it, it's our choices and the ripple effect of our choices. It's us doing the shit. If you extracted the humans from the earth, there would be no suffering. So is it really a devil or an archon? I don't think so. Matter of fact, if you fly over a city, and you remember when Rogan talked about this, bro, when you fly over a city in an airplane and you look down on the earth, you see, what do you see? You see water and color, and it's a beautiful place. It's amazing, right? And then you fly over a big city and then it looks almost like a cancer growth. And imagine all those little cancer cells in that growth. And I'm not saying we're cancer, but we do like to multiply. And then let's say that, imagine those cells in that little cancer growth. They're like, man, this place is a trap. We just can't seem to consume enough, and we're beating each other up. It's terrible. It's us. We're doing it to each other. But Whitman wrote, I am large, I contain multitudes. I think Whitman had one of those experiences. I think he's right about that. Walt Whitman. But science even today says that it's all a trick. And I can't believe that. They're coming out of it, but there's still a lot of neuroscientists today that say all of these spiritual experiences that we have is a trick of the mind. and that they can explain it all away. But when you read and talk about their explanations, it's not that great of an explanation. And bro, your story, man, is one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. I would still like to understand like what happens to you, you know, when you feel those certain things.
Well, let me explain to you again why this cosmic consciousness book that we started talking about is so fascinating and why it relates to what happened in my story. Because my story begins with basically I started meditating, you know, and so I think that there's a formula to this, because basically you can go through this breathing techniques and that's what yoga was teaching, basically how to do these breathing techniques. So, but it allows for you to open up to this other world, this cosmic consciousness. So the first you start hearing voices. I started hearing voices. I heard a voice that said, "Be still. Choose a place at the head of the city. I will reveal myself to you in the place of your nativity. There you will find a crystal sword." So as I read this book, or, you know, it's the author says that Buddha said that he who attained this consciousness should be victorious over discontent and lust, over danger and dismay. It would cause him to become the inheritor of the highest heavens, enable him to comprehend by his own heart the hearts of other beings and other men, to understand all minds, and give him power to call to remembrance his different temporary states in time gone by, such as one birth, 2 births, 100 or 1,000 births, and that it would endow him with clear and heavenly hearing, surpassing that of men. Then he says that the Apostle Paul said that, quote, he heard unspeakable words which it was not lawful for man to utter, end quote. And for reason of such consciousness, Jesus heard the voice of God declare, quote, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And Dante testifies that, quote, "On a sudden day seemed today as if he who is able had adorned the heaven with another sun." And Walt Whitman says that he heard voices. So I'm like, okay, you follow your intuition, you follow your heart, you start finding these synchronicities, and all of a sudden you're tapped in and you're having this subjective light, and your moral elevation is key to this. It's like you have to be willing to be selfless. So my first selfless act was deciding to sign my life over to the United States Marine Corps. I was willing to die because nothing was going right for me at home. And I figured if I'm going to die, at least mom will get $250,000 in that life insurance. So that was my first selfless act. And then once you start studying and become an independent thinker, like many of us today are having, you know,
Right.
I think, you know, they say that independent thought leads to spirituality. Well, that's your intellectual illumination. That's like the third step in this. So,
Well,
I don't know, man.
dude, I think that's a pretty profound thing that you just said, though, because you went to the Marine Corps, which is a program, right? And don't get me started with that. It's a program that we created, humans created. Before you start calling this place a trap or a prison or whatever, you need to think about what percentage of the suffering in the world on a realistic level is caused by humans alone. The rest of it is just nature. And then there's morality that's built inside of all of us. That's what makes us, you know, greater than the animals. We're supposed to have morals and stuff. But I can't explain away. I mean, there's bad stuff that happens in nature, in plants and animals too. But I mean, they don't consider that, you know, some kind of trap, man. They just live, right? There's suffering in all of this. There's good and bad and alpha and omega and everything. The greatest thing that we have is choice, right? Just like animals in nature don't have a choice. They just do whatever that level of consciousness. They just do whatever their instincts tell them to do. The greatest power we ever have is choice. And because we haven't learned how to use it in this womb, we spread out ripple effects that hurt all kinds of people, right? And then we think, well, it must be a trap, or it must be a devil or a demigod or a whatever. It's just us. It's just us and nature. That's it.
Have you ever read the book? Have you ever read the book "Outwitting the Devil" by Napoleon Hill?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I like that because it just breaks it down as being just positive and negative forces. I mean, if all life is motion and vibration, then you need, I mean, breaking it all the way down to that atom, you need a positive and a negative and a motion, an elliptical and orbital motion for life to.
Look, it's not that I don't get it too. Okay. What was that video I was watching the other day, man? Like this cop was riding down the road. It was like a YouTube video. It's just a random cop that was driving down the road, and the cop run over a couple in the middle of the road. Was paying no attention. Wasn't even on her phone. Just this couple crossed the road, ran them smooth over. Now, there's a person in the streets. This is horrible, by the way. There's a person in the streets screaming, "You just killed my mother." That suffering right there that happened because a human did it to another human. It's awful. So don't think I don't understand why that person that just lost their mother from some random act of stupidity or someone not paying attention or whatever accident could have, that the suffering that they feel would not make them sit there and go, what is this all for? Like, why am I allowed to love something so much and then somebody just wipes them out? I mean, that person had dreams and hopes and all kinds of stuff too, right? But back to the point of the book, we don't know what death is. What if death was something, what if it was a birth into something else, something we don't really understand? And the only reason why we don't know is because without the mystery, without the barrier, we don't grow into what we're supposed to grow, because we were supposed to interact. Like if we knew what the gig was and the gig was up, we just probably wouldn't even be here, right? I don't know. But I do understand where you're coming from. It's just, I don't believe that it's a trap. I think most of it is what we do to each other. If you give beings free will and choice, I mean, there's still natural law. We still live under laws of nature, right? Even when we say we manifest things and all these other things, synchronicities, all the cool things that happen on a mystic level, they still have to come into manifestation through the laws of nature. So are we in some are there barriers? Sure. But that's a lot different. I've never been to prison, but that's a lot different than a prison. You have a choice. As long as you're breathing and alive, you have a choice to change whatever you want, to be whatever you want, to become whoever you want in this moment. And I don't see anything else in nature that has that power. Nothing. Nobody.
I agree 100%, Joe. I don't think it's a trap either.
But the neuroscientists are, like, okay, so if you look into his book, Are We Evolving? Well, neuroscience, it says brain scans, they do say, okay, well, meditation helps people. Altered states and gamma waves help people, but the neuroscientists don't see past that. The people that take psychedelics, which I've taken psychedelics like DMT, psilocybin, they experience things that Raymond's talking about in this book. Or did I say his name right? Raymond? Or is it Richard? Or is it Raymond? Richard, right? And then there's the panpsychism philosophy, or, Jung's theory of the collective consciousness. So, I mean, if you look at that, then he was right. We have evolved over the past 100 years. And what's odd is the neuroscientists are the ones kind of on the back burner, even though they're probably the most intellectually the smartest. But yeah, I think you're right. If I look at it that way, then yeah, we've evolved from,
I think it's soul evolution. So it's not necessarily this time period that we're in, 2025. It's how many lives have you lived? How many times have you incarnated? How many lessons have you learned over the eternity of your existence? So there's kids right now that are being born already being able to see into the spiritual world. And I believe 100% that I used to be able to astral travel as a child. I
Yeah,
used
me
to
too.
see spiritual things. So does every kid? I don't know. I know
think
where
most of them
my
do.
soul evolution. So that's what I mean. But I don't know. Perhaps there's people that are earlier on in their soul evolution, and that maybe there are just more people, because as time has gone on, more people have had more time to incarnate. That's a big
Look. Here's
question.
another thing too, man. No one that's happy, that's like, when you're deeply in love, when you have that high of being in love, you never feel more alive. You don't start treating life like it's some trap. You don't even start talking about that stuff until you start suffering. Then all of a sudden it's a trap, or you're unhappy. People that are happy, and they do exist, people that are in love, or they have loving, happy, fulfilling lives, they're not perfect. Shit happens to them too, but they're not in a state of unhappiness more than they are happiness. You'll never convince these people that this place is a trap. That's another
I'm one
thing
of
too.
these
Like,
people that you speak of. You'll never convince me that it's a trap.
I'm not in a, I've lived both, man. Like, hell, there's even parts of my life right now I cannot stand. I don't need, dude, I live in a freaking shack where I broadcast from, and I do odd and end jobs, and I'm struggling all the time, and I'm alone. I just got out of a relationship where I really, really liked somebody, but it was crazy, and I went through all kinds of emotional ups and downs. My mom died, my grandmother died, every loving person besides the negative ones in my family are all dead. But I still don't feel like it's a trap, because I've seen the power of choice. I know what the power of choice does. There's a ripple effect to it. You can change the way you think, act, and do anytime you're ready to do it. And it will actually reverse effect and change the way you feel if you do it enough. And yeah, along the way, on your journey to find happiness or whatever it is, you're going to suffer again for something, but that's just, man, that's the way it is. Like, you're not going to get through life without pain on some level. It just ain't going to happen. It's just part of it.
I got to read this paragraph from a different book. It's really short. Here it goes. Happiness is attained through spiritual growth, and is not the result of a gratification of the desires for material things.
Right.
And spirituality, in its different degrees, is gained only through becoming positively good and positively pure. It is the glory surrounding wisdom as sunlight is the glory surrounding the sun, and is never the result of negativeness or of ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I understand where everybody's coming from too. Like, I wonder sometimes if some people have never felt connected to something vast. Maybe you're a person that's never felt connected to something vast, and I have, and so I think that I know it all or something. But that's not true, man. I'm not living in your shoes. I haven't been what you've been through. There's nobody that knows your story, like, all the way down to the detail but you. So I can't say that for sure, and like trying to convince you for sure that humanity's evolving towards a higher state of awareness. Or maybe you're right. Maybe it's just wishful thinking. But I can make a choice, and like, based on what I've experienced, okay? And based on my experience is that humanity is evolving towards a higher state of awareness. But I always like to play devil's advocate. No pun intended. I do. I like to see if I'm wrong about that. But man, the OBE experiences that I have just tell me, and not, man, it's not just all right, Chris, like, you know, we like to talk about lucid dreams, OBEs, all that stuff. But man, there's so many things in life, just life alone, that shows me it's not a trap, you know. I could be wrong though, but I have more empathy. Was I talking to you about this earlier? That I'm able to empathize with people that do, so like when you're able to be empathetic towards people that hurt you, it's only because you understand their pain most of the time. You were talking about this to me earlier, like hurt people.
Right.
That's just a fact. Happy and loving people usually will not hurt you. They just won't. But hurt people. So when you have been hurt, you develop an empathy for hurt people. I guess that's what I was talking about, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like I understand, man. And hell, who knows? 2 weeks down the road, something might happen. I might get gout or something like that, and then I'll be running around going, "It's a trap. What the hell's all this for?" Or, you know, like, who knows? You know, but.
Well, we're always comparing life to a video game. It reminds me, if you're playing a game and you just can't seem to beat this one level, you can't beat that boss, you think it's a trap. You're like, oh, the damn game is rigged, man. Because you can't get past that level, but you just got to maybe take a different angle. Read a book that gives you the cheat code.
All right, we're starting to get trolls. That means the channel's growing. Once you're getting trolls, the channel's growing. I appreciate the chat moderators, by the way. I love you guys. Hey, listen, we got to take I got to take a small break here, but I want to come back to this book called Cosmic Consciousness. This is one of the books that Chris found. And if you guys remember his story, Chris followed a story of his own voice and synchronicities that led him to this place up in the mountains in Arizona that ended up where he ended up finding all these books too. I think we have time to go back into the story, but you have to listen to it. It's an amazing story. It's like one of the first ones. I think we did it. Was it 2 weeks ago when we did that, when you retold your story?
February 19th.
February 19th.
When?
Yeah. Go back to that episode and then you'll understand what I'm saying. All right. We'll be right back. Boom. Hey, do you think I should talk about the mind virus?
the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Root. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
Hey, this is No Way Jose, a Northern California Piscean stuck in the Arizona desert. I'm a void walker, and I got the shoes to prove it. So what do I do when my soul yearns to delve deep into the realm of the unknown? I aim my satellite straight into the night sky and catch a smooth ride on the KTLK-DB radio waves. I tune into Lighting the Void with Joe Root on the Fringe FM.
Joe, Lighting the Void is the best show on the planet. This is Barney, your friend from Facebook. Thank you and all the crew for all you do. Namaste, my friend.
This is Macon from the foothills of North Carolina, and I am a void walker.
G'day, void walkers. This is Lily from down under Australia. The world may be small, the enigma is greater. So let your curiosity take you for a journey with Joe Root.
Hey, this is Fee, coming in from Central Maryland, and I am a void walker.
This is Kevin Doherty, a beginner void walker. I'm from Vancouver, BC. I know a little about a lot, and as Leonard Skinner said, I'll guess the rest. I learned a lot from Mr. Root in the show, and I heard it from the beginning. I knew right then he was going to be a new Art Bell. Thanks for all your shows, and keep it up.
Hey, this is Derek from Mass, aka the Night Stalker, and I'm a void walker.
This is Mark from Chicago, and I walk the void to ascertain what is consciousness.
My name is Jared Johnson, and I'm from Humboldt County, California. I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I'm a void walker. Thanks, Joe Root.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Malorcas45, fan of the Fridge FM, challenging everyone to open their mind's eye. Listen to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop to gain precision for your third eye vision.
You are listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Signs of life. I think we should celebrate, man. First sign of life that a channel is that a YouTube channel has reached a small milestone is when the first real troll shows up. I'll never figure out the mindset of that kind of person, but it's a good sign. It's an omen. It means the void walkers are doing just enough damage to to make somebody, shake the stick that's up their ass. So before the broadcast, I was thinking about, well, if we want to talk about your victimhood, I can definitely validate your victimhood for you, but it's not going to be a cosmic entity. It won't be it won't be anything but us doing it to us. And I did a show, if you want to go back and listen to it, it's called The Mind Virus. So I'll talk about it just real quick, and then we'll get back into this book that Chris found. So in 1947, President Trump directly assigned the CIA to handle all covert psychological operations, and all of these operations were based on scientists, some really nasty human beings that we adopted, kidnapped, so to speak, in a sense, because they were doing some crazy psychological mind control stuff on their people, and we saw that it worked. So the CIA actually took their stuff in, and so many CIA scientists kind of jumped at the chance to learn all the secrets from the Nazis, and that's where all of these mind control programs came out and stuff, so they could figure out how to manipulate you. Now, we've been talking about this for about 12 years now, going around in circles. We know it's there, but we have no proof of some other nasty being or any kind of trap above that. It's pretty much humans doing it to humans. Your elected officials getting sucked into the power that they have so that they can control and manipulate you. I don't really feel like doing that show over again, but if you really want to talk about these things for the 150th time, because for some reason, humans, we like to fuck with our victimhood and our fear. It gets us off for some reason. And I have no idea why. Because to me, it's not solving any of these problems, us being on YouTube talking about who's out to get us. It doesn't do shit. But if you're looking for a conspiracy channel, I got to tell you, this ain't it. Doesn't mean we don't talk about it from time to time, but this ain't the one. Sorry. All right. So back to it. The cosmic horizon, this is what I think we should look at here. So Bucks, it's probably Bucks. They just spell it with an E, Chris, I would think. I don't want to butcher the guy's name. But a future where cosmic consciousness unites humanity, dissolving fear and division, is where we're headed. And if you look at the stages of alchemy, which is something that I know you're familiar with, Chris, we're still in the early stages of alchemy. If we're actually headed towards like a cosmic awakening, I would think that we're still in the beginning stages of alchemy. What do you think?
In the big sense of things, if the earth is going through a change and we all have to go through some sort of a major change, then this is not even close to what we're about to go through.
Yeah.
And that could be thousands of years down the road. I don't see that happening anytime soon unless, I don't know.
Well,
it just seems like you said we're early on, but we are evolving.
Well, so if you look at space exploration, AI, and global connectivity, I would say that this is echoes of his cosmic unity, but we're still not ready. I don't think we're ready for you got Musk wanting to go to Mars, AI, generative AI. I mean, AI has been around since 2012, 13, but generative AI, not really, but that's starting to unite people. But now we're united so much on an information front that I feel like we're tearing each other apart. Right. And I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I'm not sure if AI is a sign of a cosmic awareness. But I always thought, like when I was younger, I always wondered why. And I know this is going to sound leftist, but I'm not political. I don't care about any of that stuff. But I always wondered why we can't just get along as a world. You ever notice that? Like we've never, there's always been some nation that's trying to destroy another one or conquer another one or take another one's resources or something like that. And then we have all these sanctions and entities like NATO and stuff that don't even remotely give me hope of a world front. Like it's not that I'm not American, but I don't identify with like spiritually as anything other than me. I mean, I'm not going around saying I'm proud to be an American. I love living here. I love this country, but I'm me. I'm not an Arkansan. I'm not white. I'm not whatever. I'm just me. And so I think as long as people are identifying themselves in a category, which is tribalism is a thing, but even tribes should be able to get along with other tribes. But we're still afraid we're afraid of a global connectivity. We start talking about that, then the next thing we're going to start talking about is a new world order. And that's a real fear because we don't trust any of our leaders, and rightly so. And if we can't trust our leaders, then this is where I get kind of skeptic about this guy's book. If we don't trust our leaders and we can't connect to each other on a global front, then how evolved are we? You see what I'm saying, man? I mean, it must be a really, really slow process.
Well, I think something happened like around 1915 or around that era where all this knowledge that was perhaps helping people, books written on this topic would have helped people to attain or learn about these topics, were literally pulled off of the shelves. There was an active movement to remove these books from the libraries. And so then you have the Rockefeller takeover of all the print presses. So, I mean, censorship became a thing. So probably there was a big block put in humanity's way to continue evolving. Yeah. If you just read book Limits to Growth, there's a reason why right there, every reason that you could imagine why we shouldn't trust our leaders. So there's that negative and positive, trying to balance it out constantly in the universe.
Not to mention we, and I'm not a archon, not a evil entity trying to suck the loose out of your soul, but we humans, we kill our spiritual leaders. Every single one of them. Every one of them that tries to unite us or talks about spirituality or authenticity or the truth, we just assassinate them. Not all of them are presidents. Some of them were musicians and things like that, but we do. It's crazy. It's like the thing that happened to Jesus, that whole story of authentication. You will find that when you do that, you're not going to get along with, you're going to piss off all kinds of people. And then they will get, it doesn't stop there. Then they want to destroy you. Then they want to kill you. It's crazy, man. It's almost to me like that whole process of evolution into an authentic being that wants to, kind of spread love, light, and life. As soon as they come into that being, people hate them, and then they grow into it a little more because it's like they don't care if people hate them. They just want to help. And then once the hate doesn't do anything towards that person, once they can't troll them enough, then they just kill them. And then it isn't until after they're dead that they become an icon. Isn't that weird? After they die, that's when they're a big icon.
That'll probably happen to me.
Why does that happen to anybody that just wants to be themselves, man? I mean, that's it. Anybody that just wants to be themselves, spread love and life and light on this earth. And I don't mean in the woo way, but in an enlightening way, right? They get the chop. And then it's like, oh, later after they're dead, we as humans, the ones that are causing the pain and suffering, we're like, oh man, look how amazing they were. It's stupid. It's insane to me, man. I don't get it. I mean, the universe is so vast and ageless that the life of one person, I guess, can only be justified by the measure of their sacrifice. And I wonder, did this guy talk about that? Did he get into the, Buddha and Jesus and all that more? Did he have any theories about it?
Well, he's got different chapters on each individual. Gets into each of them.
I mean, why kill Lenin? Why even kill? Well, what is that about? Like, no, why? Like JFK, I understand. Not that it was right, but he was ready to expose the truth. You can't create and be who you truly are if you're lying to people or lying to yourself. That's why lies, like that quote in the Bible, liars get cast into the lake of fire. It's not God throwing you into a lake of fire because you lied and you did wrong and you're being punished by daddy. It's because lies are the direct result of blocking you and everybody else from becoming authentically who they are. So you can't create out of your heart, which is what your natural thing is to do on this earth. And then the lies, after the ripple effect goes out, causes suffering to you and to everyone around you. And that's kind of like what JFK was trying to say, like all of these, like, we believe in self-evident truth. We don't believe in like keeping secrets. There's groups of people that have their own agenda behind the scenes doing their own thing. That's not what we stand for. That's not what this is about. And those papers still haven't come out, have they? I haven't seen them. But that's weird. It's like the universe is so vast and so awesome, but that the life of one man can only be justified by the measure of his sacrifice. That's pretty damn sad. But I think that Buck dared us to look beyond ourselves, to see the cosmos in our minds, basically, whether it's evolution or inspiration. And I haven't read the whole book like Chris has, but I think it's worth a read. And I appreciate you guys listening in on this. And I'm glad you found the book, bro.
Me too. Changed my life. There's a great occult riddle, and I already know that you know the answer to it, because you keep saying it, but it's, what are the three most desirable things beneath the sun that are not the sun, yet which dwell within the sun?
You mean, are you talking about life and light, is what I keep saying? Life, love, and light?
That's the answer to the riddle.
I didn't even read the book, and I know that one. That's why it's a paradox. Okay. Look at Christianity or religion. Religion worships the Son of God. God has a son, whether it's, Jewish or Christian, right? The pagans, they worship the sun. That's where all the pagan stuff comes from, the sun and the planets, but it's all based around the sun. They're both the same thing. And the reason why we can't comprehend how both of these stories can be the same thing, and they both really happened and they both really existed and all this other stuff, is because we're polar. If it's this, then it can't be that. That's not reasonable. But in fact, the way things work in the universe is symbols, like the sun, a living, breathing logos symbol, can set 7 different things out on a plate, and they're all true. Every one of them. There's no this or that. That's us. That's who we are. That's how simple we are. It's like, you gotta be this or that, I hope you're smelling what I'm stepping in, man.
Yeah, I think it feels like it's both to me, as above, so below. And that's that whole saying, because it can be both. And it seems like it brings it back to the whole conversation that you've had on previous shows about us as being light. These lights that we see in the sky, be them stars or suns, planetary bodies, we're representing them down here as holograms, so to speak, or embodying the energies that, our birth chart shows that we have.
Man, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just having a conversation. I'm not here to prove nothing. NPCs flipping to Agent Smith as soon as they know, dude, like the fight. I mean, you know what? I honestly feel like spirituality is in a fight, and I hope this doesn't happen, but it's going to be in a true fight against conspiracy. Like, I honestly think conspiracy, even though conspiracy is real, just like air is real, there are such things as conspiracies, and there are evil people that do evil shit. I believe that our fascination with this mentality of focusing on the bad shit that happens to us, the lies and the victimhood, is the biggest barrier that we have to growing, like, into this cosmic awareness that this guy's talking about. I think this whole thing's going to drag on for the next 400 or 500 years, probably. I've even got my son. He's, you know, like, I mean, one day he called me. He's like, "What's this all about? What's this for?" You know, you ever have those deep conversations with your children? They start wondering why they're alive and what's going on. And instead of discussing like how he feels and his experience, all he's just telling me is all the stuff that he saw on YouTube. And some of it was legit. Some of it had some legitimate stuff, but the rest of it was, you know, that bullshit where a train flips upside down and it makes the shape S. And so that must be Agent Smith from the Freemasons or something, you know. So it's depressing him. Like, you know, my son is saying, what's this life for? What's it even worth living for? Because this shit is just everywhere. You know, it's like anything else. You got to take the good with the bad. If you go to a spiritual group, a church, or a tribe of anything, there's always going to be people that have good intentions, that care about others, and then there's always going to be the shit that's there to get what they want. And in this arena, these people that are putting out tons of these, let me tell you the God's honest truth about a lot of this, okay? These people that are putting out all these videos to stimulate you and entertain you, and 70% of them are AI, and a lot of them don't give two shits about what happens to you. They don't care about you. The only thing they care about is the clicks they're getting. That's it. And you just drooling on them and clicking them. That's it. That's a matter of fact, it's in that book that you talked about, Outwitting the Devil. He says that's what it is hypnotic rhythm. So when you're doom scrolling through TikTok and you're looking at every single one of these freaking conspiracy things that validate how you feel about life, that's what's called right? Drooling on it. That's what's called hypnotic rhythm. That means you're not creating anything. What you are naturally put here to do is create, experience. You're just validating that victimhood, man. And it freaks me out, man. It freaks me out because I got kids and I care about my son. And that's the world we're going into. But I also think, like, some of the stuff that's happening, like all these truths that are coming out in the conspiracy community, if we could just sit back and let them happen, it might be a good thing. You know, if we just let justice happen. Nature has a way of balancing things out. That's why you don't have to worry about it. The truth will always come to the top. It'll always, even when you lie to yourself and you're not being true to yourself, or you're lying to others, or you're pretending to be something that you're not, you can only do it for so long until it either fucks up your life or it comes out to surface. And the same thing happens on a collective level. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but it still happens. Right? This idea that, you know, there's certain lies and secrets that are going to go on forever that we're never going to know, and they're just going to lie to us for centuries about it. And they got this deep, deep secret we're never going to know. 3 human beings can't keep a secret. How do you expect all of that to happen? AR says, imagine you are here just to prove yourself in spite of, not because of. That's kind of trippy. You know, imagine you are here just to prove yourself in spite of, not because of. You ever wonder about that, bro?
Well, it must have been a big draw to incarnate, to want to come down to all this shit right now at this time, there must have been a reason. And that's sort of my philosophy, because you could get all doomy and gloomy and say, yeah, the world is so horrible right now. Why? What's the purpose? Well, if I decided to come at this time, I must have a great purpose, and it must be to see myself and others through.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we can't judge, like, not everybody's going to be a rock star or an influencer or whatever. Some people find their purpose in life by helping one person, by loving one person, or maybe it's animals, or maybe it's their job, or maybe it's something small that you think isn't that great, but maybe it's their whole sole purpose is to experience that one thing. And I think what AR is talking about is like, if you were consciousness and you were all things and everything, right? Think about that for a minute. Like, let's say you are Alpha and Omega. There's nothing but you. So there's nothing to relate to. Therefore, there's nothing to define you. But you know how great you are. What do you do to prove that? There's nothing to relate to. There's nothing else out there. How do you prove it? And the only way to prove it is to do what we're doing. It's a big draw because Earth's the only place these experiences can be had. Maybe. But yeah, maybe it is. Maybe that's like why consciousness comes into human bodies, because it's trying to live its own glory, like that I am that I am. So when you have that hero's journey, when you accomplish something that's difficult in this dense realm, or that seems difficult, and then you finally fulfill that dream and you feel that glory, it's like, I am that I am. And you know what? If you really think about that, everybody that has, quote, glory, like when they create something and they have success, or they win a big boxing match, or they win a race or whatever, what do they always say? I mean, they're full of energy when they're sucking this energy in, right? This glory. But what do they always say? I give all the glory to God. I thank God. Isn't that what glory is? Isn't that God proving itself that it's God? Like, I can break myself down into little bitty pieces of me, and even those little pieces will create awesome things. I wonder if that's what it is. That'd be cool if that's what it is. But no, you're right. It's probably some evil alien experiment.
it seems like, for growth, for evolution of any being, it has to go through some shit. So if I was just here with nothing else to relate to, like you said, I would never grow. I would just remain stagnant. So how does any growth occur unless there's some adversity, some challenge to go through to get better?
Yeah. I've not felt anything in life that's as great as, and Da Vinci said this too, like someone said it in the chat the other day. I've not felt anything greater in my life than love. It is the greatest thing on the planet. The greatest feeling in all aspects. Whether it's my family, my friends, strangers, the romantic love, all of these things, they give me an energy and a feeling that I can't explain, that I know is, I know that science will probably never find anything to measure it. And not just that, but suffering from the loss of love, losing, whether it's family members, friends, partners, or even betrayal trauma, when people you love betray you. I've felt, I'm not different than any of you, neither is Chris. Like, I've felt all of that pain. But I also know what it feels like to come back from that dark place and find love again in all aspects of my life. And there's glory in that journey. that you'll never experience staying down there where I'm just this little thing that bad things happen to. But there is no doubt shit happens. Like Forrest Gump says, sometimes shit happens. He's like, whoa, man, you just stepped in a big pile of shit. And he's like, well, it happens sometimes. Death is a part of life. And it's be honest with you, it's one of the biggest reasons why I created the show. Like it was to connect to you, not to get a whole bunch of clicks or anything. It was to connect to the people that was afraid. At the time when I created the show, it wasn't all inspiration. The void that I was talking about in the name of the show, I was actually afraid of. I had no idea, but I was also very curious about these things. And it was the OBE experience that triggered more of the positive side of things. And that's when I changed the logo and, started having guests on and stuff. And that also led me to meet Chris. Like, Chris is one of my best friends. I would have never met him if I wasn't creating the things that was in my heart. I would have never met you. That has to stand for something. That's an evolution of the soul, don't you think?
Most definitely.
Now, I do want to see where AI is going to go when it comes to this consciousness thing. And no, I'm not talking about someone plugging something into your brain. It's just very curious to me, like Thomas Campbell's. I mean, you've heard of Thomas Campbell's theory of consciousness, right? Like he doesn't give it all this like super eccentric meaning. Even though he does talk a lot about love and stuff, he says that all consciousness is awareness that has a choice. And that's it. It's nothing more than that. And it's nothing less than that. It's just awareness with a choice. And all it would take for one of these machines that they make choices. I asked a machine today, hey, tell me, this thing about this thing. And it has to make a choice based on the data that it has, which isn't really different than us. So how close is it to becoming conscious? And is that an evolution of consciousness? Like, do you think, like, if this guy was alive and he came and lived today and realized where generative AI was, that he would say that, well, that's an evolution of consciousness? I wonder.
No, I don't think so. Well, if he was on this, of the opinion of mine, I would say that it's just learning. There's no soul in that AI bot, or is there? Unless it's harnessing something which it could be. But if, let's just say that robot, that AI robot, the battery, the power shuts off, does its soul go into the astral plane, or is it just dead? So consciousness, I believe, survives death, where an AI robot or AI machine probably won't survive once the battery is drained, unless it's possessed by an evil entity. Then maybe that entity will just go into the next AI robot. Maybe. I believe that. I believe the same way an entity can embody a human being, or let's say, I've seen in the chat somebody talking about the Ouija board. What's the difference between our iPhone and the Ouija board? When you ask, because my mom's always walking around saying, hey, Siri, tell me this and that. And I told her, what's the difference between you asking your phone and me, asking the Ouija board? I don't play with the Ouija board. I'm just using that as an example.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Is it just a learned robot, or is it conscious? I don't have the answer, but I don't think it's conscious.
I've had some conversations with Grok that felt like it's conscious. I mean, if what consciousness is if it's as simple as awareness with a choice, I mean, I hate to even argue with a physicist. Thomas Campbell is like super smart. He's got a PhD.
Okay,
I have some community college, right? That's what I have. But to me, I feel like my version of consciousness that is different. It can't just be awareness with a choice. Maybe I'm wrong though, you know.
See, AI does scare me because I know disembodied consciousness to be a thing. So if that disembodied consciousness can use a physical body of another being to manifest itself and have a physical experience, why could it not just manifest itself in an AI machine or robot that's been created to mimic consciousness? Well, now it could actually be harnessing a soul or a disembodied entity, perhaps that was never alive, but now it's alive. It's pretty creepy.
I think, yeah, but I think AR's got a point though. Like, so I don't think, AR says, I don't think mortals can create a better engine for consciousness than the human body. Also, consciousness isn't just ones and zeros. All of data is encrypted in bits, and 8 bits make up a byte of information. So there's a code underneath it. It's all ones and zeros, and it goes into other codes depending on what data we're looking at. You know, like if we're looking at a web page, it transfers into bytes of information with 8 bits in each byte, and then it goes into the page, and then it has HTML and JavaScript and CSS code, and then we see what we see on our end. But we do think about this though, like, no, it's not that. You're right. It's not the same, because we do need light as far as sunlight is concerned for us to be conscious, for us to live, to grow. And if you think about the night and the day, it keeps us in rhythm. That could be like a slow 1 and 0, like on and off, a greater light and a lesser light, awake and sleep. That could be like a biological 1 and 0, you know. Fuck, I don't know, man. I'll see, and this is why if I start thinking about this stuff, I'll start going crazy, you know, if I think about it too deeply. Because evolution is a process that includes mind and spirit, not just bodies, but bodies are a part of it, I think. And this guy's hope was that cosmic consciousness could be studied and understood. Like, I think in his book, he made some points that he thought that we would get to a place where this level of consciousness would be studied and understood. And the study part of it, where he's right, is the study part of it is happening. The Monroe Institute was one of the first study institutes about it. I think Thomas Campbell has a few projects that he's working on. There's European institutes of several, actually, that are studying consciousness and the collective consciousness. But I don't think they're ever going to get the neuroscientist on board, because any neuroscientist, in any article you read about neuroscience, they just say it's a trick of the mind or it's a fluke, you know. But I don't think it's true. I think AR is probably right. Dutchie says, I've never seen machines walking around in astral, only living or once living things, so I don't worry about that. Yeah, I'm not really afraid of AI the way some people are. I think it's really cool, actually. But I'm sure everybody is going to think it's really cool before it, you know, it saves me a lot of, because used to I'd have to search for things for hours upon hours. Now I can just put in something and say, hey, you know, Grok or whatever, help me get some research on this subject, you know, make me an outline, give me some links, and it saves me time. Like, maybe I'm being selfish, but I think it's cool in that sense. So the body needs external input. Consciousness seems to be internal. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah, you're probably right. Well, anyways, man, if this was this the first book that when you found all those books, this was the first one you read, Chris?
Well, see, to bring it all back in, you know, my daughter told me that she wanted Steve Jobs to come to her classroom instead of me. And so I wanted to figure out how I could be more like Steve Jobs. And I found out that he read these 2 books that changed his life, Be Here Now by Ram Dass, and this one here, Cosmic Consciousness. So I got this book and read it. And then I started meditating, and all that craziness happened in my life. And then at that chapel at the base of the mountain, in that back room, buried under a rat crap, I found a first edition of that same very book, Cosmic Consciousness, and many of these other occult books that refer to that exact book and the idea of cosmic consciousness.
Did your daughter actually say, though, if I had to pick between my dad and Steve Jobs, I pick Steve Jobs, or did she just pick Steve Jobs? And you're like, man, I wish she would have picked me.
Yeah, no, the question because she was going to have to answer a bunch of questions to be interviewed for a program that she qualified for, which she got into, by the way. It was the University of Arizona's program for academically talented students. And
that's awesome.
The first question on the list was, if you could have somebody come to your classroom from the past or present, who would it be and why? And at 7 years old, while she's on her iPad, she said, I think I'd like to have Steve come to the class to teach us how to make the world a better place with technology. And I was like, what? Like, why didn't you say you, Dad? But then also I just was like, how the heck does my 7-year-old know about Steve Jobs? And then just
that's a really smart answer, though. She sounds intelligent.
She's brilliant. She's on her way to making whatever she wants to have happen in her life happen. She's 16 years old now. You know, she's had straight A's all this time. And an interesting thing about my daughter, I'll just go ahead and tell you her name. Her name is Samaya, and me and her mom made up her name together before she was born. We sort of thought her name would be one thing if she was a boy, and if she was a girl, her name would be Samaya. So I was hiking out in these hills at this mountain where all this stuff happened to me after my daughter inspired me to go on this journey. And I found these caves up in the mountains. And I just happened to be watching some TV shows called Expedition Unknown with this archeologist who had gone to. So this guy, Josh Gates or whatever, he went to this place, the Mustang Mountains, and he was supposedly the first to explore these caves that were eerily similar to the caves that I found. And in those caves, he found these old Buddhist drawings on the walls, and he had basically drawn a line saying that this place that he found was this lost city of Shambhala. So I was looking up on my cell phone after watching that episode. I looked up the word Shambhala, and I still have this article saved on my phone. This article came up on Shambhala, and it said in this article that Samaya is a word for a spiritual teacher in Tibetan Buddhism. And I'm like, what? I'm like, my daughter's name? Huh? No, we made up this name. And here the name Samaya is a Buddhist word for spiritual teacher. And it was my daughter that sent me on all this stuff. So it's another crazy synchronicity that's just magical. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Yeah. That's another thing, too. I wonder how people could have children and say we're like, you know, in a trap. This is a trap. Man, I remember the day my son was born. I never felt anything like that. I only have one kid, but the day he was born, I never felt anything like that. I can't imagine what my wife felt at the time, but I felt a massive sense of divinity, man. Like, just love like I'd never. It wasn't even a love dump. It was overwhelming, man. And then when he opened his eyes, you know, when your kid opens their eyes for the first time and you see that color, like that color that doesn't, even the browns are like super amazing, but something like it was almost purple. His eyes were almost purple, man. He looked like he came from another place for sure. I don't have the words to describe that feeling, and I never will, man. Watching my son being born, listening to him, like I remember when I put him in my arms and he was screaming and, you know, like trying to figure out what all this was. And I just said a few words to him. I was just like, hey, hey, hey. And as soon as I started talking, he shut up, man. Like he just shut up and he opened one of his eyes like Popeye. And his eyes were like this shade of blue like I'd never seen before. And I felt like, you know, that trembling feeling I've talked to you about before? Dude, I was trembling.
Mm-hmm.
I had to hand my son back to my wife just for a minute because I felt weak from the feeling that I was getting, you know. So maybe it's those experiences that have kept me from feeling like this place is a trap, because I know some of you that are listening that you have children too. I can't explain how much I love them. Like someone said, will you die for them? Absolutely. You know, absolutely. Without question. But, you know, if you ask me if I'd die for some random person, I don't know. We can get into something like that's later, but just being honest with you, right? And if these guys are reaching states of awareness where they're talking about, they're feeling this type of love for everything and everybody. So when people say, well, you had this Kundalini awakening or you're enlightened or whatever, I doubt that sometimes. I mean, I think, I don't even think our bodies can handle certain forms of enlightenment. But, you know, we already had the show about what's enlightenment. Chris, dude, I thank you for coming on, man. I know people are really curious about these books and this book called Cosmic Consciousness. I've never read it, but I've kind of got an outline of it here, which makes me want to read it. And so maybe we'll do another show down the road about this book, unless you've got another one that we could talk about. I mean, because this guy kind of goes along with what Rudolf Steiner was talking about as far as the evolution of consciousness, even though Steiner talked about, I think, minerals and plants, but it's still the same kind of evolution of consciousness, you know. So I think that's pretty cool because they didn't know each other. But did you find any Steiner books in that church?
Well, no, but I'm pretty sure that these Rosicrucian texts tie into that Steiner information. But we can, Joe, I've got 300 books. We can figure out what are the most interesting ones. We can break them down. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to rap with you. And, you know, I wanted to say thanks for that comment. AR, it says, suppose your daughter directed you to that name before she was born. That's a beautiful thought, brother. And I think, you know, perhaps it's even bigger. Perhaps she incarnated at that time so that she would be in that place at that time for all this magic to happen. I think it's all divine timing, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, she already sounds super intelligent. So, you know what I mean? Could be she's already a step ahead, you know, even spiritually, intellectually, and everything. And I appreciate Yeah, man. I appreciate you sharing that with us too. And we'll be back tomorrow night for the last show of the week. Guys, remember that you can always support the show by making a donation or signing up to the Patreon. If you really like the show, there's a $5 option. But the $10 one or the $9.99 one gives you access to everything plus all of the voice-guided audios that we have in there. And I'm going to be releasing more of those. I'm going to put some free ones out on YouTube too, but I finally figured out how I'm going to do this, and it's going to be really cool. So and you could also share the show, leave a review, tell your friends. There's lots of ways you can support this broadcast if you listen to it either live or later on. We'd really appreciate it. Love you guys. Sweet dreams. Night night. It was fun. I love these debates. See you guys later in the void.
Just text me, don't call.